Welcome to this first session of North Haven's 2014 program on Science and Religion, Part 2. It's titled Evolution and the Retelling of Our Spiritual Story. You might wonder why we chose this title. I'll have to admit that we went through several possible titles, including Retelling Our Story, The Cosmos, Humanity, and the Nature of God, which we thought covered our chosen topics pretty well, but was perhaps a bit too comprehensive. Besides, we wanted to make sure the word evolution stood out because it's the key concept for a modern retelling of the story of the universe, our planet Earth, the human race, and world religions. Having presented a science and religion program here 2 years ago, you might also wonder why we felt a follow-up series on this interaction between science and religion would be a good thing to do this soon. While we covered a lot of ground in both science and religion in our 2012 program, I felt that we never really combined all of our separate topics into an integrated whole and never really focused on the evolutionary processes as the key to understanding how we came to be who we are as spiritual human beings. A second reason that we believe it's timely to retell our story is because there have been a lot of recent advances in 4 areas related to the history of human beings and life on Earth. The Human Genome Project was completed in 2003 with a complete sequencing of the human genome. Following that 13-year project, which cost about $3 billion, the current cost of mapping an individual's genome has fallen to about $2,000. And there's an enormous effort underway in medicine, biology, anthropology, genealogy, and related fields to use this new technology to improve the human condition and understand who we are, where we came from, and when. Brain research in both the U.S. and Europe has seen the implementation of major projects this year. The impetus for these new initiatives has come from recent research and brain mapping by neuroscientists in scattered facilities and institutions both here and abroad. Some of their focus has been on the spiritual mind and why the human brain seems wired for religious experience. The science of cosmology has taken huge steps forward in recent years as a result of the Hubble Space Telescope launched in 1990. And spacecraft such as the Kepler Space Observatory in 2009, the Mars rover in 2012, and numerous deep space probes such as Voyager, Pioneer, Ranger, and several others. All of this cosmological data has enormously boosted our understanding of the evolution of this universe we live in, and the story has been celebrated by authors like Brian Swimme and Thomas Berry. Finally, while biblical exegesis has been underway at least since Judaism's rabbinical period starting in the 3rd century CE, there's been an abundance of scholarly new books over the past decade that provide thought-provoking analyses of the impact new science discoveries have had on traditional religious beliefs, leading to possible new understandings of the evolution of humanity and the nature of God and the sacred. Most of you are probably familiar with such authors as Karen Armstrong, Marcus Borg, John Shelby Spong, Ian Barber, and North Haven's own former pastor, Bill Holmes. You may be less familiar with recent science religion writers such as Michael Dowd, Edward O. Wilson, Loyal Rue, and Nicholas Wade. We think it's timely to share their thinking with you and believe it will fire up your imagination as it has ours. To summarize what we intend to accomplish in the 13-week program, this slide is a statement of purpose written by Ben Marshall. No matter how much recent science we cover in these presentations, our focus will always be on how it relates to the current status and future outlook for religion. All societies and world cultures have developed their creation stories by ancestral people in ancient times. For millennia, Genesis 1 has served as the creation story for Jews and Christians alike, although scholars have long recognized this is a mythological story rising from the mists of antiquity. Now we have an opportunity to make the evolution narrative our modern creation story. Now we're beginning to understand how our brains function and how we've all inherited minds that are predisposed for spiritual experience. We want to share with you some modern thoughts on how religions and cultures evolve together and why each has had such a huge impact on the other. Finally, we'll look at modern cosmology as it occurs in our religion and what that might mean for our understanding of the nature of God. This slide shows our science and religion program in a diagrammatic format, always with a focus on the evolutionary process. We'll begin with a session on the evolution of the universe and solar system, followed by evolution of life on Earth. Then we'll spend some time discussing human evolution under the influence of our genetic inheritance and our cultural environment, with special attention to the evolution of the human brain and what scientists know and don't know about how the brain and mind work. Then we'll move into evolution and of cultural and social behaviors and their strong interaction with evolving religions around the world. We'll look in particular at the role of rituals in religious practice and why the emotions that rituals engender are so critical to the commitment they help create. We'll have several sessions at the end of the program looking at what all this means for the status of modern religions and what the future of religion and spirituality might be. Why all the focus on evolution, and why the recent worldwide interest in the twin topics of science and religion? Even though it's been over 150 years since Charles Darwin published On the Origin of the Species, followed 12 years later by The Descent of Man, a Gallup poll this year showed that 42% of Americans still believe that God created human beings pretty much in their present form, sometime within the last 10,000 years. That percentage has not changed significantly for the last 30 years. The slide also shows the percentage of Americans who believe in human evolution over millions of years from lower life forms, either with God guiding, a falling percentage, or with God having no part in the process, a rising percentage. Given the number of fundamentalist churches in the Metroplex and the furor caused by proposals to teach creationism in public schools along with evolution, we should not be surprised by the poll results. In contrast, our 2013 North Haven survey of members showed that 88% of the respondents agreed that humans developed over millions of years from lower life forms, while 6% disagreed and 6% were unsure. That's an expected result, especially since North Haven is a progressive church with a highly educated membership. In addition, we had just completed our 2012 Science and Religion program, which strongly emphasized the role of evolution in human development. But I continue to wonder, how much of evolution do North Haven people really believe and understand? For example, do you believe that human evolution ended about 30,000 years ago? Or is human evolution continuing today? Do you believe that your ancestors came out of Africa 50,000 years ago and spent most of the next 40,000 years wandering around Eurasia as hunter-gatherer bands, occasionally mating with the Neanderthals and leaving their trace on your DNA? Do you believe the human brain reflects genetic as well as cultural inheritance, and that our brains are still evolving today, perhaps faster than ever? Do you believe that all religions, including Christianity, have evolved over the past millennia, and the pace of that religious evolution has picked up, driven by both scientific discoveries and scholarly inquiry. We intend to address all these questions in our 13-week program this fall. Besides the obvious conflict between evolution and creationism, I believe there's another reason why many people feel there's a basic conflict between science and religion. Good research science always deals with questions about the conventional wisdom of what is, and with speculation about what might be. Hypotheses are tested experimentally by multiple researchers, and these hypotheses become the new conventional wisdom if confirmed, and more often than not, discarded for a new hypothesis that better fits the data. Then the testing starts all over again. On the other hand, many religious people have sought the comfort that comes from certainty about their beliefs, and especially their understanding of and relationship with God. New ways of thinking that upset long-held beliefs are not usually welcomed. A classic case of this resistance to change is the rejection by the Roman Catholic Church of the heliocentric views of the solar system from Copernicus and Galileo in the 16th and 17th centuries. In 1991, the church finally apologized for Galileo's persecution and said they were wrong about the Earth being the center of the solar system. We hope and believe that North Haven members will be more open to new ways of spiritual thinking than that. Although I should warn you in advance that some, perhaps many, of the new science ideas we'll be presenting are based on speculation by their proponents. This is especially true in the fields of genetics and brain science, and most likely in new ways of thinking about the evolution of the three Abrahamic monotheistic world religions. We'll try to point out when such speculative thinking is presented. Our schedule for this 2014 Science and Religion program is shown on this slide. Ben, Ernie, and I will introduce the program today and provide some background for it. Next week, I'll discuss a biological and biblical framework for interpretation, followed by a group discussion of a handout we'll give you today on the historic purposes and practices of religion. Ernie will then present Module 1 on origins of the universe and life on Earth. Next, I'll present Module 2 on human evolution, focusing on genetic inheritance, brain science, the interaction of cultures and religions, and the importance of rituals in religion. Ben will then present Module 3 on spiritual evolution, including changing concepts of God, what the sacred means in our lives, and what our symbols have come to mean. We intend to close the program on December the 7th with a group discussion on the future of religion as we all might see it. I hope you'll make an effort to attend every one of these sessions. I'll remind you that the presentations will start sharply at 9:30 a.m. because we have a lot of ground to cover and we want to have time for the Q&A each week. Finally, I always want to know a little about the background of the speaker when I hear any presentation, so I can make a judgment about whether they're likely to know what they're talking about or not. Let me tell you something about my background, and then Ben and Ernie will do the same. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tom Timmons, and I've been a member of North Haven since 1968. I'm a chemical and nuclear engineer by education, and I worked for Mobil Oil for 30 years, both as a research engineer and as a manager, before retiring here to Dallas in 1997. My academic research was at MIT in its nuclear engineering laboratory and nuclear reactor. One critical lesson I learned from that research is don't ignore any new data because it doesn't fit your hypothesis. Instead, change the hypothesis to fit both the new and the old data. Now that sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people, including some scientists and many religious fundamentalists, want to ignore new facts because they don't fit their old data, that is, their cherished beliefs. You should know that while I've been educated in some sciences and engineering, I have no formal training in theology, philosophy, biology, genetics, psychology, or neuroscience. Most of what I think I understand about those fields has come from lots of reading on these topics, plus many years of theological discourse in North Haven's worship services, and especially in our freewheeling lectionary Sunday school class. In addition, I've always been interested in history and in family genealogy, so I've enjoyed the research I've done on religious history and genetics to prepare for this course. I've also always been interested in gardening and watching things grow, but that probably doesn't have anything to do with this program. Unless we view this class as a garden where Ben, Ernie, and I will be planting seeds so we can see what flowers bloom. Before turning this over to Ben and Ernie, let me make one other comment. For this to be a true learning experience for all of us, we should expect disagreement, sometimes sharp disagreement, about some of the ideas we'll be discussing. All of these sessions will be designed to have a 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A at the end of the hour. A couple of the sessions, including next week, should have up to half an hour of dialogue as we explore the framework and concepts to be presented here, along with expectations of where we're going. The final session is intended to be a group discussion reflecting about what new insights, hopefully, we have taken from this program and what the future of religion might be. I encourage all of you to participate in these discussions on both the question and answer side. With that, I'll turn it over to Ben Marshall.
And I'm Ben Marshall. I have something about myself. I'm a retired elder, which means ordained clergy in the United Methodist Church. I've been here at North Haven since about 2000. I consider myself a Christian educator. Basically, that's what I've done almost all of my ministry. I have a doctorate of ministry in that field. I've studied spiritual direction. But I've always been concerned about the nature of faith, what is faith, how people come to faith. So this is a very important realm of discussion for me, exploration for me. So I look forward to it very much. Some words, introductory words. What's happening today in the religious realm is a deep revolution. It's been going on for some time. It's felt but not understood by most folks, and the extent is certainly not obvious to very many. It's a revolution on the order of the move from polytheism to monotheism, I think, and maybe greater. And it's not just affecting Christianity, though we can see it more there if we look. It's a revolution that's brought about by many factors, basically the ones that we're considering in this course. We're realizing how our understanding and talk about God has been culturally conditioned over the centuries, over the millennia. As Tom has outlined, science, including the kind of science involved in studying religion, such as textual and historical criticism, and especially archaeology, has enabled us to see the universe, our earth, our history, and our religious traditions in very different ways that counter those traditional religious stories that we have taken literally and historically. The revolution is, of course, ultimately a cultural one that in turn drives the way in which we see our God, as well as the way our religions impact our culture. This cultural revolution has caused a strong backlash in the religious world against what is seen as a secularization of life and a downplaying of the importance of religion. But it's anything but that. Many of the violent clashes in our world today are simply a playing out of the fear-based tensions caused by the changes in our culture, along, of course, with the great mistakes the nations of the world have made in trying to manipulate other nations and peoples for their own ends. We also see the fear-laden backlash in the strong religious conservative movement that wants to hold on to traditional perspectives, so much so that Christianity in America seems to be characterized by only the more conservative viewpoint, as is the case with other religions as well. But the revolution is with us. We are in it whether we know it or not, and whether we like it or not. How it will turn out we may not fully see in our lifetimes. I'm sure I won't see it. But it's a revolution that promises to deepen and not weaken our spiritual life. There are always revolutions, I should admit, so I guess I should say what's happening is really more of an aspect of the larger evolutionary processes that will continue into the infinite future. But it's helpful to try to see that evolution in pieces so that we can have some comprehension of what is happening. Phyllis Tickle has called attention to every 500-year house cleaning garage sale that the church in the West has gone through, and this is only the latest one. I should note here that Christianity, for instance, has changed tremendously from what it was in the days following Jesus' crucifixion, and it will continue to change in the future in this evolving history in which we live. That means if we want to find meaning in today's world, we may have to change our ways of thinking about God as we go along in life. And I imagine that you certainly have done that from the time you were a child until now. I'm still finding my concept of God to be evolving as I encounter new perspectives and experiences in life. What this course will seek to do is to help you to get a hold of some ways that you can begin to find meaning in the future that is coming. The fundamental one is how we can find a renewed understanding of the nature of God as it is revealed in the evolutionary story of our universe and of human beings. For some of us, this won't be difficult at all. For others, it may stretch your mind a good bit and bring up some fears of losing something that has been so important to you. Let me assure you that whatever you've received by your relationship with God in the past, if it is what it truly should be, you will not lose it by what you hear here, nor what's happening in this evolutionary process. One thing that we must be very clear about is that our present concepts of God are not the final or only statement about the existence or nature of God. Our concepts are simply the latest reflection of how we experience the world. God exists outside of and beyond any of our words about God or definitions of God. Religions are only the culturally conditioned ways that we've come to use to relate to that great mystery we call God or the sacred. Religions have always changed. God, the sacred, the ground of being, is still called God, has not. Our task then is to simply be open to the ways in which God is revealing God's self in this universe now and get on board. It is crucial to remember that at the same time that this evolution is taking place, there are some concepts or ways of life that sit at the very heart of what I understand God to be about that will see us through whatever changes come. Those concepts and ways exist beyond culture, exempt from the usual conditioning because they talk about the things of the Spirit, love and joy and peace and kindness and justice. We sometimes call them the eternal things of life. Those things are a part of who we are as spiritual beings because they come from that sacred spirit within us, received from the very essence of the universe, and I believe those will never go away or change. So I hope that you'll open up and not be afraid, as the angel always said in the Bible, and let us help you to see the future of religion and of our concept of God in new and more meaningful ways.
My name is Ernie Stokely, and as a way of introduction, I would first like to briefly summarize my educational background and my career pathway. I graduated in 1959 with a Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering from Mississippi State. I came to work for Texas Instruments at that time, and during that time with Texas Instruments, I've spent 3 years in Germany as a field representative. I was with TI for 13 years. During those years, I married here in Dallas, and I had 2 children, a boy and a girl. Both are still here and have since added 1 grandson. In 1968, I received the Master of Science degree in Biomedical Engineering, a new discipline in a joint program between the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School and SMU. And then I went on 4 years later to receive the PhD degree from those same institutions in this new field of biomedical engineering. I joined the radiology department at UT Southwestern in 1972 and was involved in research in medical imaging for 15 years there, while participating in the joint University of Texas Arlington Southwestern Medical School Biomedical Engineering program, where I was co-chair of that program. I moved to UT Arlington into computer science in 1987, and 3 years later, I became the chair of biomedical engineering at the University of Alabama in Birmingham, UAB. My research interests were medical imaging in nuclear medicine and also the development of special instrumentation for measuring brain function and brain blood flow. And then later, I moved into computer vision and image understanding, algorithm development applied primarily to medical images. I retired from UAB about 11 years ago, and 3 years ago, Joan and I moved back to Dallas to be near our children and grandchildren. It has been a wonderful time to renew old acquaintances and to make new friends here in Dallas. My current hobbies are hiking, volunteering in the North Texas Master Naturalist Program, and bird watching. Once I retired, I finally had the time to read the books I never had time to read and to pursue some interests that were sidelined during a busy career. One of those interests was to investigate what scholars were saying about the history of Christianity. So I began to read what I call the deconstruction texts. John Shelby Spong, Bart Ehrman, Kieran Armstrong, Amy Jill Levine, Marcus Borg, Burton Mack, Rodney Stark, Matthew Fox, and others. I found other seekers on my spiritual journey. For 2 years, I led a group of lay people in Birmingham called Southern Progressive Alliance for Exploring Religion. We hosted in Birmingham Spong, Borg, Crossan, Levine, Ehrman, and many others. Somewhere along this religious journey, I encountered a book by Brian Swimme and Thomas Berry called The Universe Story. When I read it, I had a spiritual epiphany. I suddenly understood my own life in a different context. It was an exhilarating and exciting experience. Today, I now found myself in resonance with spiritual naturalism, also called religious naturalism. I find deep meaning in books by Michael Dowd and books like Ursula Goodenoug's The Sacred Depths of Nature. I still retain my Christian roots, but I now have a much broader relationship to Christianity than in my earlier part of my life. I am participating in this program because I want to invite you to share my own spiritual experience following the revelation of the modern-day cosmic evolution story. I also want to invite everyone to continue to expand and grow their religious beliefs as we explore over the next few months the current science story, the miracle of how we came to be, and what this story says to us about how we live our lives and in what context we see the world around us. Thank you.
Before we begin our dialogue with you on expectations for this Science and Religion program, I have a little homework assignment for you on a handout that's being distributed now. It's titled Historic Purposes and Practices of Religion, and it's a list I've been putting together since our 2012 program, with a good many additions and changes over the past 2 years. It's organized into time frames when these practices are believed to have first begun, covering the bands and tribes of hunter-gatherer cultures, the chiefdoms and villages societies, and the more recent city-state-nation civilizations. Some of these are certainly open to argument about when they were first practiced by humans, but the likelihood is that some of them may be even older rather than younger than indicated on the list. These groupings clearly show us that most, if not all, religious purposes and practices date back many thousands of years, even though the specific content and rituals have been culturally adapted over the centuries. Also, these religious practices provide a broad coverage of behaviors critical for long-term human survival, either individually or as a tribe, community, or nation. Let me say that again. These religious practices provide a broad coverage of behaviors critical for long-term human survival, either individually or as a tribe, community, or nation. A couple of things can be said about any human behavior that hangs around this long. First, it must be generally beneficial to individuals and communities, or the behavior would have disappeared a long time ago. Second, a predisposition for this behavior must be built into our genes and our DNA after being passed down through this many generations. That doesn't say that all people are led to behave this way, and clearly some don't, but only that a large number of folks in most societies are inclined in this direction, and any counter behavior is likely to run into considerable opposition. Your homework for next week is to look over the list and answer 3 questions about it. Which of these religious purposes and practices are most important in your own spiritual life? Which of these religious purposes and practices do you think are most important to sustain morality and justice for all in a society, that is, a community, a city, a nation, or in the world? Which of these religious purposes and practices do you think will be necessary for the institutional church to provide and encourage for world societies in the future? You will note that these functions of religion are intentionally worded in the archaic view that our ancestors might have felt in those ancient times. You may want, consciously or subconsciously, to reword some of these functions to a more modern concept that fits your own spirituality or religious practice. These are multiple choice questions, so you can give as many answers to each question as you want. Also, you're certainly free and encouraged to add any additional items to the list that you see as important. You don't need to hand in your homework at class next Sunday, but you might want to bring your notes back for reference. We'll talk about your responses during the group discussion next week, because we'd really like to hear what is most important and least important to you. We also intend to revisit the list at our final session and see how our thinking might have changed over the course of this 13-week program.